This is Family Ghost, and we're live on the air. I'm Geever for the time, and I hope I got the name right. Is that the right way to
You
pronounce it?
did? You did?
Okay, cool. So, well, tonight is this is the first time we've talked to you, and we want to let people know the podcast will Anchor FM and also be on Newsly. We are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. So you can use coupon code GHOST and get 1 month free premium subscription. So you can stop scrolling and start listening to your favorite podcast. We'll be on Newsly within an hour. So thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
So you're known for your kind of action-packed, post-apocalyptic dystopian adventures that are focused on like the zombie genre, right? So you started with we have 3 books and maybe a 4th book in another continuing series about these post-apocalyptic dystopian adventures. Was like in 2019, right? Love in an
Yes.
Undead Age.
Yes, my first book was Love in an
And then
Undead
you
Age.
had followed by Damaged,
It,
and then you had a 2020 Damage in an Undead Age, and then in 2021 Reckoning in an Undead Age, and you're currently working on a second set of books for another like branch of that series.
yes, I am. The current new series is called Steel City Apocalypse. And the series is called that because it takes place in my hometown of Pittsburgh, PA, and which is also known as the
Cool.
Steel City. And the first book is called Undead Menagerie, and that released in January. And the second book is called Undead Sanctuary, and it will be released in April.
Wow, you like to write like the way I write like music. I release a lot of music, and you seem to be very consistent with your work. You're passionate about what you do. When did you start writing?
I started writing, actually, I started writing as a kid, and I always loved to read. And I'm not sure exactly how or why this happened, but at some point, I kind of lost my confidence as a teenager around writing fiction. And I don't remember there being any kind of specific incident for this. I just did, and so I started to do
Mhm.
a lot more creative, what they call creative nonfiction, which is like essays and op-eds and things like that. And anyway, I decided, finally, 25, 30 years later that I really wanted to write fiction again. So I decided that I was going to write a story, and I wouldn't even call it a book. I called it a story because it was too intimidating to finish an entire book. I mean, that's a lot of stuff to write. And So my husband and I, he's like my biggest fan and my biggest supporter, and he and I were like kicking around ideas of what I could write, and we kind of, by accident, kind of hit on zombies because I had thought, well, I'll write a romance, except I don't read romance that much, so all my ideas were terrible.
Mhm.
And I would tell him, oh, they were terrible. I mean, I'm not just saying that. And so, I'd tell him my latest idea, and he'd be like, that's terrible. And so then I tell him the next one, and he'd be like, "Honey, that sucks," And like I knew it did, so it didn't matter, It wasn't like he was hurting my feelings. So one night I was telling him my latest bad idea, and he told me it was bad, and I said, "Too bad it can't have zombies." And we kind of looked at each other, and we thought, "That's what I should be writing." And so
That's the
I
ticket.
started.
That's the ticket.
Yeah, I started from there, and I haven't looked back.
It seems like zombies. In my mind, I like the zombie movie I always into, which is kind of an odd one, is like Plan 9 from Outer Space. The Ed Wood movie.
Yeah.
But Bela Lugosi kind of chopped in. But I just liked that I was always going for the kind of offbeat thing, and I'm like, wow, that's the kind of zombie thing I get into. Kind of like the old, like black and white type
Hmm.
of original like horror. Yeah, I mean, I was a comic book fan. I was really into EC comics. I was into horror
Mhm.
comics. I was into like Dracula comics in the '70s. I'm a child of the '70s, and like
Right,
I
me
liked
too.
anything that was kind of like Werewolf by Night and Dracula and Boris Karloff and all that stuff. I started
Right.
getting into that. But so it was that what like you felt like you had a lot more to say in the zombie genre that you thought you had a voice there. There's something you could do that was interesting.
Yeah, I did. I mean, like, I grew up, I'm the second youngest of 9 children, so that my parents were part of that last generation of brainwashed Catholics, who had big, big families. And, and, so my older brothers and sisters, like my oldest brother is like almost 11 years older than me. And my older brothers used to watch all these scary movies. And my parents actually really liked scary movies. They would talk about going to see the movie Them, which was like this 1950
Uh-huh.
horror film with
Yeah,
these huge
yeah, it's the kind
radioactive
of
ants.
thing I like.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so like I grew up, with this love of scary movies, and we had this show called Chiller Theater every weekend. It was at 11:30, and it was double feature with two old monster movies or horror movies. And I wasn't allowed to watch it because I would have nightmares. And but my little brother and I always wanted to watch it. So we started to sneak downstairs, and my brothers wouldn't rat us out, but if my parents came along, we had to go to bed. But we would watch these films, and so I always had this great appreciation for that. And then as far as zombies go, George Romero is like the gold standard for zombies in terms of the modern genre because he
Yeah,
invented it. And the thing I love about Romero is he uses the zombies as a metaphor for a lot of things and about modern culture, and he like has a lot of social commentary in his, and I love doing that. I love doing that
yeah, it's
because
kinda yeah.
it just makes it really interesting, and you can, when it's done right, people who enjoy that will see it and they'll enjoy that extra layer, and people who don't enjoy that often don't, and they can still
They
enjoy
don't
the
see
book
it.
too. Yeah, yeah, but it's kind of a really
But that's
subversive
kind of
way to get your say about
way to
things.
do it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always thought it
so
was interesting if you think about, like, Rod Serling in The Monsters on Maple Street. He was able to use the Twilight Zone to make statements like that.
oh, all the
You
time.
all the time, because it was science fiction and it was horror because this Twilight Zone was a combination of multiple things, but The Monsters on Maple Street was like this big statement, but you could just look at it as it was, or you
Mhm.
undercurrent, you could see he was always making a statement about society. And
Exactly.
I think George Romero is doing the same thing, you know?
Exactly, and, that's one of the things, zombies as far as, like, fiction categorization, they can be horror, they can be, science fiction, and what I've always, a good benchmark I had for like, is something science fiction or is it fantasy or horror or whatever other thing it might be, was, if something has like a supernatural inception, that makes it horror. And if it has a
Makes it horror.
scientific based one, it makes it science fiction. So one of the things, and I grew up reading science fiction. I mean, I read tons of stuff, but I really
Mhm.
loved science fiction as a kid, and I still do. And one of the things I love about science fiction is, how it imagines the future and all the different ways things can be, but it's always incredibly predictive. I mean, not all of it, but some of it just always nails it. It's always spot on, and like phones, these are like
Yeah.
Star Trek communicators.
Star Trek. Yeah, yeah. They
I mean,
got to
they
the
are, and I mean, they don't call a ship in orbit, but they practically do everything else. Um, and so
it's
so
tricorder,
when
tricorder.
yeah, exactly. So, so like when you are working in a genre where, you have this framework for being really creative and being able to do things that aren't, based in our current reality, you can do a lot of things with it. You can make a statement about what's going on in society right now that maybe you can't in another way, or how you would like things to be in
Mhm.
the future. And that's really something that I love about writing.
Whereas like Star Trek, Star Trek always made statements in the same
Hmm.
way that Rod Serling does and George Romero is like, when you get into cartooning, you even get like Stan Lee, Jack Kirby. They used to make
Hmm.
statements. I mean, the whole idea of the X-Men was a way
Right.
to talk about people who were different, but like make them have these fantastic powers. You don't get to, oh, it's like, they're just like, they're all these superheroes, but it was like mutants. So they're
Hmm.
making a statement about people who are different. So you can see the undercurrent. You can pull things out of that. Just see, oh, they're just superheroes, you know. But
Hmm. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's the for the science fiction fans out there, one of my favorite science fiction series ever was the Battlestar Galactica reboot, which happened
oh
in
yeah,
the late 90s, well, the late 90s, early 2000s, more early 2000s. It was during the first George W. Bush uh,
I watched
administration.
that a lot.
And, yeah, and they, and this was a time when, like, this was after 9/11. There was a lot of debate about, um, you know, how our reaction to that as a country was shaping our political discourse and our public discourse. And and then there was like Guantanamo Bay, and it comes out that like the America, which is supposed to be the place that it stands for like justice and democracy and freedom, and your day in court, is torturing people, and nobody was touching this for with a 10-foot pole except for Battlestar Galactica. They were examining what
Yep.
happens in the face of a massive tragedy, how societies are militarized, that torture, what constitutes torture, is it ever okay? And
Mhm.
and for me personally, that show was like a sanity saver, because somebody was doing it. And so that's one of the things that's also great about writing and about fiction and various genres, is that there are things that can be too difficult or too um it's not it's not even that they're difficult, but they're too radioactive to approach head on
Yeah, yeah,
in
to touch it.
in a particular
Yeah,
time, but you can do it in other ways. And I think one of the things that makes great art, or makes something art, versus like a hobby or a pastime or whatnot, is that there's a larger setting, and it often is trying to examine larger themes beyond what you see in front of you, what that like finished product
yeah.
is.
You
um,
can you can think about that in like progressive rock. You think of like bands like Pink Floyd do the Wall,
mhm,
and they could, the experimental psychedelic band actually is making a statement, but people would just take all this as this awesome music, but it's actually got, you know, Roger Waters is making statements. He's actually, but
mhm,
you're going through David Gilmour's guitar playing and the great playing of the band, and sometimes it's like it's masked. People don't actually understand the lyrics they're hearing.
mhm,
But you can still,
sure.
as the writer, make your statement, and then people, oh, that's just a great song, and they don't even get it. What the real intent of the writer is. That happens a lot in music, where
Mhm,
if you have the beat and people don't really hear what you if people who want to hear it or really dive into it will find it. Like same with like the fans of your writing,
mhm,
who understand what your undercurrents are, and other people just do the pass, and they don't go any further.
mhm.
They don't see it. It's always a zombie.
Right, right,
You
exactly,
know.
exactly. And I think it's really important to have, recognize that both ways of enjoying art are perfectly valid. It doesn't make people who are looking for maybe that deeper meaning or the social commentary any smarter or better or anything. And it
Mhm.
doesn't make people who aren't looking for it, vapid or shallow. It's just,
Well, people just like
different
what they
ways.
like, or
Yeah,
hear what they hear.
different ways for people to, enjoy various forms of, entertainment. And I think they're both really valid.
So and it's like foundational I didn't get to is like, why are you a writer? It's because
Well,
like it's something that you love and you wanted to do what you love.
um, well, you know, I have a joke in my bio that the only job I ever really wanted was to be a Starfleet officer. So I kind of have to be a writer, you know? Um, and, you know, and this is, in a lot of ways, it's really true, you know, because um, I have this incredibly overactive imagination. Um, and I love to I mean, I love to read. I've always loved to read. You know, I was that kid who was in the corner with a book when other people were playing kickball. I mean, I played kickball, but you know, all things being equal, I often would opt
Mm,
for the book. And and so, you know, that part of it is my love of reading. Part of it is, you know, thinking like, well, I could do this. You know, like I would, you know, like I watch a movie with my husband, I'll be like, oh, well, this is, you know, be predicting what's going to happen. And my husband will be like, oh, you could write this. I was like, yeah, I know. So part of it was like, yeah, I can do this. But then part of it too was just the realization that like what I was doing was fine. It was okay. You know, I worked at a university and I supported a program and it was a great place to work. It was Santa Clara University, which is, you know, the part of the setting for the Undead Age series. And and you know, it was great, but like there was very very little about it that spoke to my soul. There was very
mhm.
little about it that I found personally fulfilling. And so you know, so when I got the chance to like really get serious and pursue writing, it was, you know, kind of like a switch getting flicked, you know, because I think I was about
Yeah,
5 or 6 chapters into writing that first book when I'm still so intimidated and just calling it a story, when I realized I could do anything I wanted. And all of a sudden, it was like, "Oh my god, I get to
makes
play
sense.
make believe. This is what I get to do." And when people ask me what I do, what writing's about, I say, "It's playing make believe. It's playing what if." And deciding, you know, what could happen if this happened. What might happen if, you know, space aliens came down right now in the middle of this interview. Um, so, you know, it's so I mean, it's great, you know, and like so it's really fun to get to indulge your creativity and have it be your job. It's not the only part of the job, you know, because I'm a independent author, a self-published author. So like as far like when it comes to like the business
It's
side,
a
I
real
wear all
business.
hats, you know? And
Yeah,
so it's
yeah,
not like I don't get to write all day every day, you know? Um,
yeah.
because there's always some kind of business side of things to attend to. But I guess I'm a writer because I have this overactive imagination and I'm always coming up with stories and I'm always making stories for things. Like I'm like walk down the street and I see a dog and all of a sudden I've spun this whole yarn in my head about why this dog is there without the person, um, you know, and what could have happened. And, you know, I have no way of knowing, but like, I mean, my brain, that's how my brain works. My brain processes so much information through making up a story for it. So so part of it I think is just the way I'm wired. Part of it is, you know, having loved reading and you know, part of it is just it's a really satisfying creative process, you know. I mean, some of the most terrifying words that a writer can hear are I'm reading your book. I mean, it's just like, oh boy. Oh, I really hope they don't think it's terrible.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, when you talk to someone or you interact with someone on social media and you know they tell you that they read your book and they really enjoyed it and you know or you know they loved it or it's their favorite book, which you know or I mean, crazy things like that. I mean, that is a really humbling and gratifying experience, to have somebody say that, like, they spent their time and they feel like it was time well spent, and this story touched them. I mean, there's just no higher compliment you can possibly get as a writer.
I think that's really interesting because in the age where people are like, in music, our fans a lot of times like they only have an attention span for like a less than 2 minute song, right? So
Mhm,
when the type of art that we do as musicians, it seems that the world has changed. There used to be more tolerance for longer songs.
mhm,
When you're a writer, you'd be able to get your reader actually, they engage. They don't just skip around. They actually read the whole project. They listen to the whole thing. For musicians, like if somebody would listen to the whole album, not just a single or the playlist.
mhm.
It seems like the fans today are less likely to do that in the music world. They tend to bounce around. And so it's cool that you can kind of capture an audience and get them into your world and really get you. Where I think a lot of times musicians, we don't feel that people are really getting the broad sense of our work if they only listen to one song.
Right, right, and I remember, because I'm a child of the '70s and '80s as well, and, I remember, like, being really surprised when I heard that, like, well, people don't listen to albums, they just listen to this song or that song, and I was shocked because, usually the best song in the album or the favorite song in the album
It's
is
not the
not
single. It's not the
it's not
Yeah,
the
it's not the
single,
single.
And, so I was like, "Wow, that's just crazy." But, that does permeate into, the publishing world as well, because, like, there are a lot of people who, like, there are some readers who, if the whole series isn't done, they won't read it because they wanna binge it.
Oh,
They
binge
wanna
binge read it.
start that they wanna do the reading equivalent of binging it on Netflix. They want to start that story, and if they like it, know that they can go the whole way through to the end, and then there
Wow.
are there are just certain genres where people are just like voracious readers, like, romance readers are crazy.
Mm.
I mean, they will read 6, 7 books in a week, and while romance books tend to be shorter, they're not that short. And,
Yeah, some of 'em are pretty long.
yeah, so, so depending on your genre, there can be certain different demands in terms of what fans expect in terms of how quickly you publish. But in terms of what you're talking about, which is something that demands people sit down and hold their attention for a while, it is very different than music. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, though, the creative process that you mentioned and why you're so, excited about it. It's the same kind of feeling when I've interviewed over, like, 350 musicians, and
Hmm.
most of them will say that they got into it because it's like, they wanted to be like a Star Trek officer. I mean, they kind of parallel thing, but, like, they knew
Right.
they really couldn't function. They got the Frank Zappa kind of thing. "Well, I can't function in the world. I'm a musician."
Right.
So it's like that. I can function inside my record and on stage, but like
Hmm.
I can't do a regular job at all. Like you think about like Hendrix or a lot of famous musicians. They couldn't barely do regular things, right?
Right.
they just weren't they couldn't do it. So they had to
Hmm.
find something else to do, and they happened to be good at music. But um, yeah, it's that creative thing is just very satisfying. You know,
Hmm.
like, I think musicians, the one thing I would say is like the immediate gratification when you do a concert, that you get your
Sure.
fans immediately getting you that right away, where is a kind of a delayed like communication with your fans because you don't get it like
Exactly.
exactly at the same moment.
Yes, yes, that's very true. My younger brother is a musician, for that's what he does for a living. He's in a punk rock band called Anti-Flag, who have been around for like 30 years, and they're on tour right now. And like
Cool.
I've been to a bazillion of their shows. And there is nothing like being at a show where, like, the band is on fire and the crowd is on fire, and like there's just this energy going back and forth. you can't get that anywhere else. You really
Yeah.
can't. And it is like really neat. And that is something that like writers don't get. We don't get that at all. And it is it is a slower process, and especially as when you're newer, you've got to like build up a fan base. You've got to even find readers,
Yeah, you're saying like if
before.
they want to see three a trilogy, that they're not gonna go get your first book until they see the third book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some people will like wait, and then some people will like email you and be like, "Hey, I hate to be a pest, but when's the next book coming
Is
out?"
it coming
Which
out?
I've actually done. But the one nice thing about being an independent author and being a self-published author is you have a very direct and immediate relationship with your readers. You know,
Mhm.
because you're the one who's out there doing the work, doing the promoting, trying to meet and entertain people. And whereas with the traditional publishing world, there's always this remove, because there's the publishing house apparatus between the writer and the author, or the author and the audience. And while that is somewhat less now because of social media, it's still a different animal. So, as an independent author, you have a lot more latitude and more opportunities to build like these direct connections with readers, and like there are people who I met online because they read my books. And now I
Yeah.
see them every day and we chat, and that's like totally just because of the books. And there are many authors who I have made friends with, who I haven't met in real life, but they're fantastic, and they've been really helpful and supportive, and just really helped me as I figure out how to do this whole author thing.
Have you
And
found that, like, podcasting and social media has helped you connect with other creative writers that
oh, absolutely.
you have these new forms where before you might have had to go to a convention or go to a signing or go to a symposium. Now you can actually do all this stuff, like, online. You can have
Yeah.
these, like, online. And does that help? Because does it is it I don't know if it's like the people. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday about networking, and it was like, if you have an online networking, you can actually get people to participate that maybe wouldn't have participated if they showed up live,
Sure.
because some people are reluctant to actually come up to you, right? But if you
Hmm.
do like an online symposium, more people may actually they will be more comfortable to actually talk to you and actually
Hmm.
ask you questions or put forward that they want to talk, connect or share something that maybe they wouldn't have had the confidence to do in like face
Sure. I
to
mean,
face.
I've had that experience myself too, where I would definitely be too starstruck or intimidated to go say hello to somebody, but I might do it online. Um, so there. I mean, and just the number of opportunities to meet and interact with people online is they're just vast compared to the opportunities that are in front of you in real life. And they create opportunities for people who can't you know interact in other ways, whether it's for whatever reason. um at the
Mhm.
same time, I have recently started to attend comic cons. um
Oh, that's
and
working. That audience is into what you're doing.
Well, yeah,
The comic book
because,
audience.
Comic Cons, there's a lot of crossover with, like cosplay and fantasy and whatnot. A lot of
Hmm.
people really dig the post-apocalyptic stuff. So, I've done several of those, and that is really cool. It's so fun, to it's so fun. Like when I did the first one, and I just promoted on social media, "Hey, I'm going to be here. If you happen to be around, um, this is where I'm going to be." There were people who came out to see me. They were like,
Yeah,
"Oh
you're
my god,
surprised. It's
I saw that you
surprising.
were." Yeah, they were like, "Oh my god, I love your books, and I saw that you were going to be here, and I was just so excited to meet you." And I'm like, "Oh, wow." you came out here to see me, like that just blows my mind. And then, so you get to have conversations with people, and then there's just all these people you meet, and like I always have candy at my table, to kind of
Do you have
keep.
merch? Do you have merch beside your book?
Oh, sure.
Do you
Well,
do?
not really. Not really. At the moment, no. I just sell my books. I just have, signed copies of the books. But honestly, the selling is secondary to
Mhm.
meeting people.
The
And
connections. Oh,
those
you like the
conversations and
connections.
interactions you get to have with people, they're great. They're awesome. And then, you know, there's so much creativity there because people have their costumes, and they're walking around as Darth Vader, or all these different characters. I don't
Yeah.
even know who a lot of them are, but like the amount of time and effort that people put into these, and to see that creativity is like amazing. It's a
Well,
very
it's really cool because, like, back in the 70s at Comic Cons, people didn't really do that, right? Like,
mhm,
at the beginning, when I went to Comic Cons, it was just the total comic book nerds that we
mhm,
were just looking for Jack Kirby to sign our book or try to get
right,
Steve Ditko to sign our book, and
mhm,
that's what it's about. And then it started to open up to people, playing characters and dressing up like Spider-Man or dressing up like Captain America, and then going beyond that and bringing movie characters and TV characters.
mhm,
And so it's expanded. So what's cool is it used to be just all the creators
mhm,
and the writers and all the people, or that was the focus. And now the fans are the focus too. So I think that's a
mhm,
really different dynamic than when I went and the focus was, oh, I want to talk to Dave Sim, or I want to talk to Kirby, I want to talk to John
mhm,
Byrne. It's like that was the artist was the focus. Now
right.
people themselves can be the focus.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, like I said, I've only been to two. I'm gonna do another one in March, and so I haven't experienced the experience you have, but yeah, I mean, the focus isn't just on the content creators. It absolutely isn't. It's about the people who are attending as much as anybody else.
I think that's fun, to see that. I've seen the same thing at the anime convention and manga conventions. Like, I guess they get rolled into the comic convention, but sometimes they're separate because manga
Hmm.
is its own thing. But
Sure.
yeah, it just seems really interesting that synergy with the comic book and the cosplay audience is connecting. And because zombies in comic books, it's been there forever. I mean, it's always,
Hmm.
in the 70s, it was all over it. Even now
Right.
more with The Walking Dead, there's comic book
Right,
versions
and
of
The
that.
Last of Us,
So
so
yeah, there's many different variations of people taking zombies from different perspectives and trying to, as independent comic book writers try to angles. And so there's really interesting stories in the smaller publishers. Because I've always, as a comic book fan, I was always into the smaller publishers like Image and Dark Horse and Slave Labor
mhm.
Graphics. They would have interesting big, stories that the Marvel and DC didn't do.
Sure,
And I like the
sure,
fact you had
sure.
these creator owner that would go and create something like Cerebus or create something, different than more like a Tank Girl, and
Mhm.
so you're like, wow, there's different stories coming from different perspectives.
Right, right, because and when it's all just coming from one place, whether it's publishing or Hollywood or whatever, there you will never get those different perspectives because you've got, certain people who are in those calling the shots there, and it's not even necessarily on purpose, but they're going to go with what's sold before because God forbid you take a risk in Hollywood, and
Yeah,
so you don't necessarily find people who are going to innovate and do this really weird off the wall stuff that it'll never sell. Well, yeah,
yeah.
until it does,
Until it
so.
does, they see you get McFarlane created Image and he took Spawn away from DC and Marvel and said, I'm going to put it out myself. And
Mhm.
guess what? It kicked off, and then he created a whole world outside of Marvel and DC, and with all these indie publisher people could come in, and leave the majors and
Right.
develop all those new characters are really getting developed from the indie companies. Like the
Right.
brand new characters like the Bones and the ElfQuest and the Sir, they come from outside the big industry, just keeps on rebadging old characters or changing the sex of a character, changing the race
Right.
of a character, but not creating a new character.
Right. Right. And I
All
don't
the
think
media
you
publishers.
yeah, well, I don't think you ever get once I mean, something can start out as like a creative endeavor, and it's new and it's unestablished. But as things get established in any kind of institution, you lose the innovation for whatever reason, whatever it is, you lose the innovation. And so you get to a certain point where there will be no innovation within a structure,
Hmm. Yeah, that's
and it
true.
has to come from outside. And I think that's one of the things that is so great about people being able to do, to DIY so many things, in the arts and in music. And because of the technology we have nowadays, they can get it out to people. Now, there's good sides and there's bad sides. Like Spotify's great. They got their music out everywhere. They've also absolutely
Nobody
killed
gets paid. You don't get paid. You
yeah, they've absolutely killed incomes for many artists,
Yeah,
because
yeah, they don't pay.
yeah, so
But,
so it's a double-edged sword, but in terms of, being able to get out there and connect with people, it's technology. I don't think there's ever been a better time, to be able to do
I
that,
think what's great
and
what well, one of the things I would ask you is, like, as an independent author, I had talked to some authors before, and they didn't
Mhm.
like being on the big publishing houses because when it came to, like, the art direction, the cover, like certain things, they wouldn't let the author do it. They wouldn't they say if the author wanted a different cover, they said, "No, that we know better. This should be the
Mhm.
cover." Right? Or they wouldn't allow them to put it into a different channel, or they told them they had to
Right.
change certain things. So you have a lot more control over your whole project, and you have more control where you're going to place it, and maybe your movie and your film rights and your all those like type of rights. So you have a lot more that compared to what the publisher might have done, right?
Oh, absolutely. I am in control. I own everything. Whether it's good or bad, whether it works or it doesn't, I decide. And so that can lead to mistakes. You don't always make the right decisions. When I first started out and I released the first book, I didn't really understand the business of being an author. I didn't understand the
Mm.
business of selling books, and um, I didn't understand the tropes in terms of covers. Like I understood the tropes of, like for post-apocalyptic, oh, you have the plucky band of survivors, and you have
Oh,
um
yeah, yeah.
you have the useless person who messes things up, and you have the super hardcore, person who's like always prepared, like there's certain kind of characters and kind of things happen. You have the family that's far away that you have to get to, like, so you have these tropes, and you also have visual tropes, and I
Oh,
did
for the covers,
not
what
for
would
the
work and
covers.
what doesn't work, and yeah.
Right, and I did not understand that, and I wanted to be different, and that's great. You can
Oh,
be different, but different will not help you get people to buy your book. And if people don't buy
yeah.
your book, they're never gonna get to see to, get to be introduced to your stuff. So, like, I decided I was gonna do it different, and I did, and I got this really great cover that I love to this day that is completely not the right kind of cover for a
If you want to
post-apocalyptic.
sell the book, if you want to sell the book.
Yeah, yeah, and so I did two covers with this particular artist who's incredibly talented and did exactly what I wanted, and they're great covers, but they're not the right covers to sell a book. So I had to like get them redone, and had to pay for new covers, and that was, oh, and that's okay because what that helped me understand that, like,
you learned something. Yeah, you learned
well,
something.
and there are places where you get to be creative, and then there are places where it's not about your creativity.
Mhm.
If you know, no, you don't have to do any of this. You can like do whatever you want for a book cover. You can do whatever you want. Absolutely. Nobody can make you do anything if you're independent. But if you want people to buy a book, if you want people when they're looking through Amazon or Google Play or whatever, when they're like looking at these little, inch by inch thumbnail images, if you want them to look at something and say, "Oh, I know what this is. This is something I'm going to be interested in," you have to have the right kind of picture on it. Otherwise, they are not going to take, because you've got like 2 seconds to get their
Yeah.
interest, and they decide whether to click or not. So, if you want to sell books, then you can't. Then you really need to like understand these things, and so that was a it took me a little while to understand
Did
like
you get
where
some
the writing.
outside, like, consultant? Do you get some consulting or somebody to help you with that?
No, it was just I eventually came to realize that the cover just wasn't right, and the more I the more I learned about how to publish and market a book, the more I understood what I was doing wrong and what I was
Okay.
doing right. And so it just became clear to me that like these were not the right covers.
So you just did some your own research, and you checked out what was working maybe on the market. You did your own kind of market research or your own,
Sure,
like,
sure.
analysis.
Exactly. Yeah, and like or even just, like you would think the first time I heard somebody say this book was totally not what I expected based on the cover. You would think, oh, that would
Oh,
be an
that clicks,
indication.
yeah.
But, when you're really invested in something, you don't. And, when I look back now and I think about like, oh man, the number of people who said that, I mean, that was like a big red flag that was being waved right in front of my face, but I just couldn't see it. But I mean, as an independent author and self-publishing, yeah, you're completely in control. And like one of the reasons I wanted to go that way is because um, some people, not all people, but some people want to be traditionally published because they want that validation. They want that external validation that yes, your book is good enough. Well, I didn't need that. I knew my book was good enough. I knew my books were good enough. So I didn't need that. And if you do the traditional route, you have to sell your book several times before
Mhm.
you get it because you have to find an agent. So you have to sell them on the book. And then the agent has to sell publishers on. They have to sell an editor on the book at a publishing house. And then that editor has to sell their boss on this book. So like you've got to sell this book 3 times before somebody is actually going to say,
And then
sure, we'll
everybody's getting a
publish it.
piece of the pie too.
Well, yeah, and
Everybody's getting a piece of the pie, so
yeah, exactly. And well, and then it's a year. So let's say, you get published. Well, then it's a year before your book will come out. And then if you write rapidly, if you write real fast, if you write a lot of stories, well, they're only going to publish one book a year for you. That's just the way traditional publishing works. And so there are these limiting factors. Now I'm not one of these people. I've recently revamped the way I write, and I've been able to be a bit more productive. But like I know people who release 10 books a year. That would never happen
yeah.
if they were traditionally
But it's the
published.
same thing with, uh, in the indie music world, like the big publishing houses for music, they'll want a band to put something once every 2 years or 3 years.
Mhm.
And a lot of, musicians will put out multiple records in a year. A lot of I saw some indie, um, songwriter put out like 200 songs in 1 year.
Wow, that's
And they were
amazing.
actually connecting because the way TikTok and Twitch
Mhm.
and Shorts and Reels works, it makes sense to do that if you use those tools, because then
Right.
those markets want to see new stuff all the time. So if you're writing all the time, if you're in the traditional world with the A&R, they're like, oh no, we got to prepare, we got to do. But if you're in that other world, we're on YouTube and other TikTok and all that, that world wants content like all day, all the
Right.
time. And so if you're a very prolific creator, that works better.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
because you
that
can put more
can.
stuff out.
Yeah, that absolutely can work better. And I know like and like I know authors who are both traditionally published and self-published, you know, because there are some people who like they might have a particular book and they went with a publisher for whatever reason, but then they've got a bunch of other books that they put out themselves, you know, and in the writing world that's called hybrid publishing. Um,
Hybrid. Oh, that's cool.
yeah, you know,
It's a different
doing it
way
for
to
the
do it.
both, you know. But you
A
know,
little bit of
there are a
both.
lot of ways to do it, you know. But being in control was definitely one of the things that I was one of the attractions of doing it myself. And just but primarily it's just like just not wanting to wait and wanting things to be able to have a say,
Yeah.
because you don't get to pick the book covers with a publisher, and you don't get to you do have to change the stories, you know, sometimes when you're working with an
Mhm.
editor. And, you know, if you don't like the changes they made, it doesn't matter, because
Yeah.
you signed a contract with them and you have to make those changes, you know. Now, that's not to say everything I write the first time is fabulous, because, you know, there are a lot of changes that go into writing, just like there are in any artistic creation, whether it's music or painting or whatever. And like you have to learn to not be so protective of your creation that you can't improve it,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
if you are not going to listen to what people are telling you, people who know what they're doing, whether it's a more experienced musician, a more experienced writer, an editor. Because, like, you know, I've worked with developmental editors, and what they do is they look at your story and they say, okay, you know, this is what's working, this is what's missing. Let's figure out what you can do. And you know you're working with a good developmental editor when you're sitting there talking to them and you're like, oh my god, this is going to be so much work, you
You know,
know.
yeah.
You know, that's when you know, like, that's when you know this person really knows their stuff, because, you know, gosh, I'm getting my hair all messed up. um you know, because it's not every idea is great,
Well,
you
that's
know.
why you
You know,
that's
and
why
I
you use recording engineers and producers.
exactly. Yeah, the exact same thing, you know. So you know, you have to, you don't want to like get run away with the idea of I can be in control and this is my baby, and you know, because it's not going
Mm.
because it could be a lot better if you would collaborate with people. And like when I first started writing, I was incredibly protective of my story. I was very resistant
Mhm.
to different ideas that didn't fit into what I thought um I wanted it to be, or where I thought it was going to go. And like my poor husband, because God love him, you know, we'd take walks with the dog and we'd be walking and he would make a suggestion. I'd be like, ah, I can't do that. And then about a week later, I'd be like, you know, that was a really good
Okay.
idea, you know? And he'd just be like, yeah, okay.
Really?
So, but
Really?
you know, but I learned that like you can't just say no. You do have to listen, and you know, and you know, sometimes you have a gut reaction, you know, and like when I had a writing group, you know, if everybody is saying this needs to change, you have to change it. And it doesn't matter whether you like it or not. Everybody's telling you, or a majority of people are telling you, this doesn't work, this needs to change. You have to do it because they're right. If it's half and half, then you know you have to really think hard about it, you know.
Like it's a
And then you
directional
know,
thing, right? It's more of
yeah, yeah,
it could be valid what you're doing.
It could be, but it might not be. And when you're not, when it's pretty evenly split, well, then you have to like really weigh it and then measure that against your gut. Sometimes people are just completely off base and you totally ignore that. And then there are some people who like are always right. Like I have a friend from my first writing group. Kathy was always right, always. And
That's cool. It's
not
good to
only
have that.
not only could
Yeah,
not only could she identify a problem, but she could always solve it too. She always had a solution. I
that's
always did
awesome.
everything she said to do because she was so good at it. But you have to, it's weird because you put so much of your time and your effort and your soul into these things, but you have to not be so protective that you smother them, and
Yeah,
that can be scary. And then when you put them out in the world, you have to let them go, because they aren't yours anymore. Um, and that doesn't mean that like I don't like want good reviews, Of course I want good reviews, And that doesn't mean if I read a review that says, "Oh, this is terrible," that doesn't sting because it's smart, it really does. It does. Um,
yeah,
but but once it's gone, once it's out there, it doesn't belong to you anymore. I always say once it's out in the wild, it's on its own.
yeah.
And
Everybody owns it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's
because
like the music fans tend to like the songs that the artist actually didn't like. What I found a lot of
Is that
times is
so?
a lot of musicians I've talked to is like this, my A&R person said this is the song, and like I didn't really want that single,
Mhm.
but they were right. And the song I love, the fans don't care about. But the fan that they, the song that we put out, that's what they like. And then sometimes that really burns because like what actually is popular kind of is like jarring to the artist because like, wow, I really
Mhm.
don't like that song, but that's the song that made my money. That makes me who I
Exactly.
am. And then I had to do it. But that's not the one I'm like, I wish the fans like this one. But it's like that's that yeah, like you say, you have to give it to the world. And sometimes the fans, that's the choice they made. Yeah, they
Right,
didn't like
right.
your other one.
Yeah, and you can't make people like what you like. You can't, you know? Um, so, you kinda it's a very creative endeavors are very, very they're really weird in a way because, you put a lot of yourself into something and you're really coming from a friend of mine described creativity as coming from a heart place, from a heart space, and so
Mhm.
it's a very emotionally vulnerable place to create from, and then you just put it out there, and
Yeah, people throw darts at it, you're like, "Oh, they're hitting my heart."
yeah, exactly, and you have to be able to like step back from that, and let yourself go on to what the next thing is going to be,
Yeah, you win, and you're like, with music, it's like 99% of the stuff we put out doesn't work. Like,
Mhm,
most of it doesn't work. It's very rare in your catalog if you check how many songs an artist actually has, and the
mhm,
ones they put out, and then the ones that they put
right,
out that actually worked, right?
mhm,
It's such a small percentage of what they actually created.
right,
So it's like you're getting disappointed. If you got disappointed on all the things that didn't work, I don't know how you could do it because most of the time it doesn't work.
right, right, well, exactly, you couldn't, and it's funny when, my first book, it's about 127,000 words long, and for science fiction, anywhere between, like 100,000 and 130, 40 is pretty normal, and then I cut that book down. But that book was a lot longer. That book was about, like, 150,000 words at one point, and, there's a lot that I cut, and, because you don't need it all, and it's the same thing with, like, when you're going in and making an album, you might go in with 40 songs, but you're not gonna put that many on, or 40 ideas, but, when it
Yeah,
comes
you drop it
time
down
to
to 8 or
release
10,
the record, you've
it
gotta have maybe
yeah,
10. So,
yeah, yeah, it's like what the tolerance for people, is like a 30-minute, 40-minute album where previously you could do 60-minute, 70-minute records and
sure.
stuff, and now you have to do very short. And so, yeah, and then there's like a lot hits the cutting floor. Now, a lot of it you'll go, well, I'll just use that on the next thing.
Mhm.
Or what we've been able to do now is like sync licensing. So now it's like,
Mhm.
okay, the ones that didn't work, I'm going to send them for sync licensing and get them into advertising, movies, get them into video
Oh,
games, get them to all
cool.
these other places. So there's
Mhm.
other places we can go.
Mhm.
And then that actually is becoming more satisfying that, oh, wow. And our rates are better if I sell it to TikTok or put it on
Mhm.
Reels, or I actually give a game or song behind game playing. The royalty rates are
That's
higher than Spotify. So there's all
that's
kinds
so
of new ways to do stuff where the rates are higher for like everything other than Spotify.
well,
Like so you can actually make money in other places.
it's interesting because one of the things that's really big in indie author circles right now is direct sales, and is taking your stuff directly to your readers. And for that very reason, which is because you can sell something, you can sell an ebook through Amazon, and you're going to get seven at best, you're going to get 70%.
Yeah,
um
7%, yeah.
and then but so Amazon's going to take their cut. Then, because they're evil, Amazon is going to charge you a fee to deliver that file, which doesn't cost them anything to do, but they do.
Yeah,
They're the
that's
only
what you
one.
got a deliver fee for.
They're the only one. Nobody else charges a delivery fee. um and then like with different mediums, it can be different. Like with audiobooks, like um
Is it higher rate? Do you get a higher
well,
royalty
it
or is it
depends. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, because um if you do an exclusive deal with Amazon, then you can get like a 40% royalty rate, which is pretty bad.
that
um
doesn't sound
and
great.
and if you're not exclusive with them, you can get 25% from them. I mean,
Oh, that's even worse.
that's it's terrible. Now there are other places you can sell it, but if you can cultivate a relationship with your readers, and ask them to start buying directly from you, well, then you can make 80 or 90%
From your
of the
website.
money.
So you build a website and then you build a portal and people can get it right through
Right.
your own
And
portal.
then, you got to train people slowly over time to, some people will never buy from you, and that's fine. People should buy wherever they're comfortable buying. But, as you bring people into your ecosystem, you can train them to do that. But, that's a really big thing in independent publishing these days, especially because, with all these online platforms, well, what if they go away?
Okay, what do you have?
What do
What you
you
buy is
have?
vaporware. It's
Yeah,
vaporware that goes away.
you have nothing. Yeah, or, I mean, there are authors who Amazon has, like, frozen their accounts
And
and
then you
banned
can't even
them.
get the stuff.
And, then you can't even get it back, and, like, with all these different platforms, there's nothing you own, like, a lot of
Yeah,
and
it's
so
not
that's
cool.
another reason why it's really important to, like, cultivate a direct relationship with your audience. Not just, I mean, you should do it anyway, because these are the people who are
Yeah.
interested in what you're doing. um and so you want to know who they are and what they're about and what they like, so
You build
you
a mailing list. So you get that mailing list and then you build it up and you've got like
right.
something that's
Yeah,
valuable.
because you own it, because you don't own that Facebook page, you don't own that Instagram account, you don't own any of that stuff. That stuff can go away or be taken away from you tomorrow.
But
And
yeah,
if
they can
you
drop
if you are building everything around that one thing, then it's not a good way to go. So like direct sales are a really big thing for that reason. And so I've started doing that recently. They're a tiny little percentage,
you.
they're a very small percentage, but as I keep at it, my
It's
hope is
actually,
that
it's kind of what the music world, a lot of bands have gone indie. And on top of that, they're doing their own vinyl, doing their own
right.
cassettes, doing their own t-shirts. And that's kind of where you get all the money. Like as an artist, you make more money on your t-shirt
Oh,
or your
absolutely.
vinyl than you ever will on your downloads. You can make a smaller amount. You could sell far less. You could do like 10,000 vinyls and make
Mhm.
more money than you ever did on your Spotify.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
know?
Yeah, I'm actually really familiar with that because, with my brother's band and coming out of the punk scene, and which has always been really super DIY and whatnot, like bands, maybe the really, really top tier world tour blockbuster people, maybe they make money on ticket sales, but everybody else, when they tour, they don't make money on tickets. They make money selling records and t-shirts
Barely
and,
break
meeting
even either.
fans.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yep.
it's interesting.
So
There
I
are
think
some
we hit
similarities.
our hour mark. Yeah, I
That
think
went
it's
by
just
really
do it
fast.
yourself is a core theme. Yeah, I mean, I think the commonality I've talked with a lot of creative people is the kind of do it yourself mentality and the spirit to be independent so you can gain control over your work. And I think a lot of artists, you want to like it's like you said, it's like your heart work. So if you can be more part of your heart work, and that doesn't mean you don't bring editors in, you don't get advice, you don't take, you don't just do everything. But I think a lot of it is just, I always find it very satisfying to work, whether it's art or painting or any, or even film. When somebody does it, it just shows a lot of who they are. And I like to actually,
Mhm,
kind of get that picture into the artist. And I think it's just a really cool experience to try out, people who are maybe outside the mainstream structure. And I've always
mhm,
been, pushing emerging artists, and no matter what type of work they do. So thank you for
mhm.
being on the program.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. Have a great night. And we'll be fully published by tomorrow. So we'll send you all that to get your fans to know where this will be. Come to places, we'll send that to you. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.